Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited for the opportunity to talk to all of you about our passion projects, what we live every day, which is the world of CBD. So our goal here is to give you the basic 101 so that when you leave here, if anyone asks you, what is CBD? You can answer them definitively and with some great backup points for why it's amazing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I've got 4 fantastic panelists with me here today, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, starting with Bianca.
My name is Bianca. I am the president of Purulum. Purulum is a flavor house, and we also manufacture e-liquids and now CBD products.
Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Moyer, CEO of Criticality, a North Carolina-based integrated hemp grower, processor, and formulator.
I'm Jose Martinez. I'm the CTO of Criticality.
Hi, my name is Christian Cipher. I'm SVP of Global Specialty Products, Managing Director of Specialty Crops with Pixis International.
And I'm Ellen Saxon. I'm the Director of Marketing at Criticality. So you have several companies up here who are all related and can generally represent all of the elements along the CBD production supply chain. So we're like a one-stop shop up here. So it's okay with you guys, why don't we start with the very basics? What is CBD? Brian, do you want to start us off since you kind of deal across a lot of these verticals?
Sounds good. CBD is short for cannabidiol. It's one of many cannabinoids that are found in cannabis sativa and industrial hemp. And, excuse me, it's the one that's most prevalent and found in industrial hemp. It is non-psychoactive. It's a very important difference as people look at hemp, the difference between hemp and marijuana and the primary element that's there. CBD interacts with the human body through the endocannabinoid system, which is a system of receptors that are found throughout your body. And those receptors regulate such things as mood, appetite, stress, and other functions within the body.
Thanks, Brian. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess you touched on how it works. Where do you get CBD? What kinds of products do you find CBD in? How do you use CBD?
You want to take that one?
Any of you?
Okay.
Just jump in.
So basically, CBD, there is different delivery mechanisms. And obviously, within the CBD arena, the primary delivery mechanisms are inhalation, or oral, or topicals. From the inhalation is more like the CBD liquids. From the oral comes in different forms, more from the tinctures or oil drops that are sublingual, or you have 2-piece capsules or gel caps with different formulations that they can have different onset benefits. And then the other form is the topicals, and then as a topicals, you have different type of formulations. So some of them that they will be skin penetration, some of them they will be skin treatment, or lotions, or creams.
We've had a bunch of people coming to the booth today, asking what is CBD, how does that relate to THC? Can you get high from using the products? Can one of you address that question that we get a lot, and how CBD relates to THC?
Sure, I'll be happy to take that. The main difference between marijuana and industrial hemp is the amount of THC that's found in industrial hemp. All industrial hemp, by definition, has below 0.3% THC, and thus there is no high associated with hemp like there is on the marijuana side, and that's the primary difference between the two.
Is there THC in CBD?
So THC and CBD are both, they're separate cannabinoids that are found in the industrial hemp plant. It's just the level. So CBD products that are made from a hemp oil extract, can have up to 0.3% THC in the final product. Anything that exceeds that is not permissible under the federal and most state legislations out there today. But so oil-based products, yes, can have some THC. Some products are also made out of what's called isolate or purified CBD. In those cases, there's no THC in those products. Those are THC-free products.
And the consumers that are working with the Criticality or current brands, what are the main things that they're using CBD for? Why are they buying CBD?
So if you recently, there was a study done by San Diego State University that went and did a survey of why people are using CBD. And the primary reasons people cited in that report were to treat pain or inflammation, to help with sleeplessness, and also improve mood and lessen anxiety as the three primary reasons. There were other reasons also, such as nausea and a few topical inflammation as well, both systemic inflammation as well as topical inflammation.
Okay, thanks. We get questions too. People are sort of wondering, you know, is this a drug? Is it FDA approved? Do you want to talk a little about, maybe Christian, about the sort of the drug side of CBD and how it's been approved in the United States for use?
Sure. So the FDA has approved one prescription drug for treatment of specific medical conditions as it relates to epilepsy that contains CBD. All other CBD on the market is more similar to dietary supplements or nutraceuticals. The FDA also has purview in terms of what CBD can be added to food substances, and they're in the process of kind of working through that framework with public consultations and things of the nature. But as it stands right now, the only approved, FDA-approved drug is Epidiolex from GW Pharma.
Right, okay. Yeah. All right, we'll just skip that part then. Do you guys, maybe we can talk a little bit about the state of the CBD industry right now. I think we're all recognizing, just based on what's on the show floor, that CBD is happening fast, development is happening quickly, a lot of new players coming into the industry. So let's talk a little bit about the state of the CBD industry. Starting with you know, major development early in the year, which was the passage of the Farm Bill. Can one of you tell us what that was and why it was significant for the work that we're all doing in CBD?
Sure, I'll take the start, and then. So in December of 2018, President Trump signed the 2018 Farm Bill into law. The Farm Bill is significant for the hemp space. It made permanent the previous 2014 Farm Bill, which allowed for state pilot programs to grow hemp. And there are some important, some very important additions on top of the 14 Farm Bill that the 18 Farm Bill included, and that was essentially specifically segregating marijuana and industrial hemp. So that way they do not fall within the same category and essentially DEA codes. That separation is very important for, obviously, for the development of new products, ultimately going in and how the FDA will affect it, but it's now no longer a scheduled substance. Industrial hemp is not. It's completely separated. It's off the DEA Controlled Substances Act. So that's the primary thing. But within that, there's still, each of the states has to submit to the USDA its own state plan for handling industrial hemp and CBD products. Some of those plans will address growing, processing, and retailing, but ultimately it's up to each state. But the most important news is essentially now it is federally legal to grow, process, and retail hemp-based products unless states have otherwise implemented contrary laws.
So that means that more companies are trying to act on that, and as consumer demand grows, we will see sort of more introduction of products into the market. So maybe Kristen, you can talk a little bit about where you see the opportunity in terms of demand. Like how big is this going to get?
How big is big?
Yeah.
So that's a great question, and I've got a two-part answer for that. So pre-passage of the Farm Bill, there are a few that I would call reputable research companies out there who looked at the CBD market pre-Farm Bill, and it kind of ranged from about $500 million last year to going to, by 2023, to about $2.9 billion. Go back to December and the passage of the Farm Bill, which cleared the roadblocks on a federal level, and you started to see a tremendous amount of interest from large corporations, as well as smaller mom and pop companies, the agricultural communities, and a host of other players. The largest estimate that I've seen published is an estimate north of $20 billion by 2020 post-Farm Bill. So the passage of the Farm Bill has created significant interest in the category from people who were otherwise afraid to enter the category due to the complex legal structure surrounding CBD with the 2014 Farm Bill. There's still a significant amount of complexities, as Brian mentioned, on the state level. So if I am a big box CPG company and I want to carry CBD products in my portfolio or on my shelves, I have to look at each individual state by state by state to make sure that I'm in compliance with the individual state laws. So there's a tremendous amount of interest now that it's federally legal, and once the states start to provide their framework, I think we'll see continued interest from big corporations all the way down to the agricultural sector.
So those are companies who want to work with CBD. What would you all say to consumers who, now that CBD is gaining a lot of media attention, it seems to me like everyone has a CBD story. Someone knows someone who's used CBD that finally was able to alleviate an issue that they've had. So the Farm Bill passed, so that freed up, the legal roadblock. Now, on the consumer side, what kinds of barriers might consumers have that you could sort of point out and help us get around?
Sure. So Pyxis has done quite a bit of funded research around the consumers and segmentation, wants, needs, occasions. And one of the big things that we initially started with were barriers to entry. The number one barrier to entry to the CBD category from a consumer perspective was the legalities, the regulation, unsure about where it stood at the federal and even at the state level. Farm Bill kind of helped to get rid of a few of those hurdles at the federal level. So that brings you more in line with the second major barrier to entry for consumers, and that is information and trust. There is a wealth of misinformation disseminated by media outlets, word of mouth about CBD. There's also a wealth of great information. So consumers are having problems kind of cutting through the noise and understanding what's real and what's not. Some of the horror stories you see on the news about, so-and-so being hurt or hospitalized because they took CBD. The majority of those cases, it's CBD laced with synthetic cannabinoids. You look at some of the district attorneys in some of the states raiding vape shops or specialty channels who carry CBD only to find out a week later that, it really was legal, no harm, no foul, but the news story is already out there. So consumers really want a brand and a company that they can believe in and trust, and one who feels that we're educating them on CBD and we're also providing the proper amount of CBD. If the bottle says 600 milligrams on a bottle, the consumer expects 600 milligrams to be there. And in many cases, that is not the case. Some significantly lower, some significantly higher. So when I look at barriers to adoption, for the CBD industry to take off, there's got to be a lot of work done helping to educate the consumer, make the consumer comfortable in the category, and develop trustworthy brands.
So how does the lab at Criticality do that? How does the lab at Purulum do that? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you explain that, on your labeling or to consumers?
So in order to solidify what Christian was saying, basically is quality and transparency. In order to implement quality, what we do is to follow basically GMP requirements. So you have to trace from the raw materials, everything starts from the plant. So you want to make sure that farming is doing the proper practice, there is soil evaluation from heavy metals, pesticides, so that and then all the practices during the growing cycle. So when the material is received to a processing facility, has to make sure that it's compliant with all the quality parameters. So before we upset material, we have to make sure that there is no pesticides, heavy metals within the range, microbial, and the proper range of cannabinoids. So once that you have in your hands under that type of control, you are going to process the material and you are going to get your finished goods. Then you're going to carry out the quality system in the intermediate process, in-process material, finished goods, and formulation release, so that you are going to tie all the parameters within the QA/QC to make sure that everything is verifiable, traceable, and then in compliance.
What about at Purulum, Bianca?
Well, in Purulum, we test the quality of the CBD that we receive, although we receive the CBD with a certificate of analysis, we also test it in-house. And most important, we have to be sure about what we are going to add in CBD products. May I talk about flavors now?
Sure.
Okay. Because what we see is that in the market nowadays, most of the products, most of the CBD products, they have flavors. And they are flavors so that they taste better, so that the consumer, at the end of the day, when he has a CBD, he can have the benefits of the CBD, but also, have a good taste with it, have a good sensory experience when he's tasting the CBD. And it's important that when you apply flavors to a product like CBD, like hemp oil, that you know what you are applying, that your flavors have to be food grade. In case of the e-liquids, the propylene glycol and the vegetable glycerin, they have to comply with USP. The oils that are used in the dilution of the hemp oil to make, for instance, the oily-based CBD products, the ones that we're going to ingest, they also have to be food grade. And it's very important that the mixing, the preparation of the e-liquids and the mixing of the flavors with the CBD and the hemp oil, they are made in a clean environment. And for the consumer, what the consumer has to do is they have to see the product and be sure that the product has complete traceability from, as Jose said, from the plant until the bottle, and traceability of everything, of the plant, then the hemp oil, then the CBD, and then in the case of liquids, for instance, the mix of the CBD with the propylene glycol, with the glycerin, and with the flavors.
So USP? USP, food grade.
Yeah, flavors are food grade, and the diluents like propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, they have to comply with the U.S. pharmacopoeia, of course.
Right, okay. What kinds of, now that things are blowing up, are we gonna have some supply challenges, either on the origin side or any of the, the USP ingredients or the food grade ingredients? Where do you see any bottlenecks? Do you see any bottlenecks to this growth? Christian, you want to start?
So from my perspective, I'll speak on kind of the ag side, the supply side. There's a tremendous amount of interest in the agricultural community in growing industrial hemp. You think about the historical returns to farmers on row crops, they are abysmal, to be quite honest. And industrial hemp is a fantastic opportunity for the farmers to make a higher return per acre than they can on row crops. The issue really boils down to, from the ag side, is for 90% of the farmers out there, hemp is a new crop. And while, you know, there are anecdotal stories about you can throw a hemp seed on a rock and it'll grow through the rock, it's not quite as robust as is claimed. And there are tried and true agronomic practices that need to be developed. Right now, growing hemp and its cousin plant is more of an art than it is a science. I love to tell the story when you go to meet a farmer or you meet a grower of industrial hemp or cannabis. They'll tell you, I've got the best stuff ever, man. Nobody else can touch my stuff. And you go down to the next farmer, I've got the best stuff ever. The way I grow things is amazing. Nobody else knows what they're doing. You don't go to strawberry farmers and talk to two of them and man, I got the best strawberries in the world. You're really gonna love this stuff. At the end of the day, hemp is a plant, and there are best practices in how to take care of a plant, best practices in terms of the crop protection agents, which are pesticides, fungicides, fertilizers, et cetera. And you've got to understand these chemicals and how they react through the entire process, from the field through the extraction to the formulation. So a tremendous amount of interest, and there will be a tremendous amount of hemp being grown, but there are challenges at the farm level with experience. And there's no definitive handbook on growing industrial hemp. Similar crops have published handbooks by major agricultural universities that they've been publishing since the 50s. Every year they just update it. Pyxis is funding the research to be able to help write said book on best growing practices for industrial hemp, to take some of the risk away from the farmers. Growing hemp is not a cheap endeavor, and if you do it wrong, your crop goes higher than the THC limit, or you put the wrong crop protection agents on it that then render the hemp that you've grown useless from a product formulation standpoint, then it's a crop failure for the farmer. So there are a lot of challenges on the supply side that will be worked out over time. And as we get solid, reliable data in growing techniques, you know, what's the proper plant spacing? What's the proper application of chemicals? How wide do the rows need to be? You know, do you trim? Do you not trim? Things like that. So that's a major issue on the supply side, which we're working through. And as the industry matures, we'll become more mature and develop with it.
Thanks. Let's talk about that raw material for a second. So hemp plant, what do you get out of it? Is it CBD?
The hemp oil.
The hemp
oil comes from the hemp plant.
Yeah. So then you get, because we get questions, is it isolate? Is it full spectrum? Is it oil? What are we dealing with here?
So may I? So yes. Basically, from the hemp plant, what you is a compile of so many ingredients and components. So it's a variety of compounds, from terpenes or essential oils that is giving the aroma, to the cannabinoids, to the flavonoids, and also you have oil, medium chains oils. So what you do is you have to extract everything, and depending what you are going to target, you're going to separate or fractionate it. So we're looking at CBD oils. So once that the material comes into the processing area, normally you have to extract the oils, all these compounds. And you have two different, if we group it, two different extraction technologies. One is using organic solvents like alcohol. And what we do in Criticality is primarily we use CO2 as a solvent, carbon dioxide as a solvent. And the main benefits of the carbon dioxide as a solvent is it's a solvent-free process. So the first application with CO2 was on the food industry, was in the 1978 for decaf coffee. Basically, the CO2 is able to have properties that is as gas as in a liquid. So we'll be able to extract, in this case, let's say the oils and the cannabinoids, and then just by dropping the pressure, the CO2 become gas and volatile, and then your compounds are free of solvents. So the first step on the extraction process is to produce the oil. Then this oil is what we call the full spectrum oil, is the primary source for every formulation, such as tinctures or ingestibles like a 2-piece capsules or gel caps or topicals. So if you want to purify further the cannabinoids, you take these, and then there is different steps and technologies that you can do post-processing steps to refine the oil, from short path distillation all the way to crystallization, and you will be able to get CBD in a pure form. Other technology that we're going to implement is what we call chromatography. It's able to cut, that is currently normally used for analysis, but in a production scale is just to purify each of the cannabinoids, so that we will be able to isolate CBD, CBG, THC, and then you can be able to tailor formulation based on the purity of ingredients.
Okay. And what happens if something happens along that way and some ingredients stay in that don't belong, or it's not as pure a source, or if there's pesticides or heavy metals? What happens then to the source?
So that is what we put different kind of point of controls from the GMP perspective. As I mentioned before, the first control is in the raw materials or the ingredients that we're using, that they have that requirements, that they are pesticide-free, heavy metals under control. So then as you do the process and the different steps, you're doing in-process testing all the way to the finished product. So you are controlling what is coming in your facility, and then you have control on your process. Like in case of the CO2, everything is contained, it's inert in CO2. It's not exposed at all to the air. So it's basically, once that you have finalized the oil, it can be just put it in containers with nitrogen blanketing or CO2. So it's not exposed to oxygen, there is no oxidation, and there is no foreign matter coming into the process. But in order to release the product, you want to make sure that it's in compliance with all your quality criteria.
So one other thing that I neglected to mention when I talked about supply side issues, so industrial hemp is very similar to, let's call it nature's vacuum cleaner. You plant it, it's going to take what's in the soil and absorb it into the plant matter itself. So another challenge in the supply chain here is if you're planting on land that has historically been used for other crops, and you've had crop protections agents sprayed on that land, the way industrial hemp really works is it's going to soak up the residual CPAs, and that will then be present in the test results that Jose has talked about. So it's fairly complex in terms of the right mix of soil protection agents, growing practices. Then once you receive the raw material, the testing that Jose has talked about, through the testing of the whole process from plant to bottle.
Thanks, Christian. Let's move on to innovations, kind of what we're all excited about, being able to work with CBD, and being able to interface with consumers. Maybe you can each think a little bit about innovations that you're seeing in your area, and share with us what you're excited about in terms of what you're working on now and what's coming down the pike. So do you want to talk a little bit about the flavors? And
since we work with flavors, it's nice now that we can have different products that they are derived from the hemp oil or from the CBD with different flavors. And we are able to make things that we know that are good and that have quality in terms of the flavors added to the products. And right now, I can say that vaping, the most common flavors that we are using in vaping, they are fruit flavors. So flavors like mango, like kiwi, like watermelon, they are common. And it was a challenge at the beginning to start using flavors for vaping with CBD because of the solubility of CBD, but now we are very used to it. And the same thing applies to other types of products.
What about the rest of you? What are you seeing that you're excited about right now?
I think, I'm just going to, before we get there, I'm going to go back to one of the questions on challenges, because I mean, one of the things that excites me as I look forward is the ability to solve some of those important challenges. And when it comes especially to groups, whether it be retailers or whether it be co-packers or whoever's buying CBD or hemp oil, I think one of the biggest challenges is making sure that you have a quality supply of that. And so the ability to scale up and continue to grow from a physically, literally with all the way from growing operations to large-scale extraction and purification to large-scale formulation is something that excites me, because there are no regulations that are currently in the space. So the FDA or most states do not have certain guidelines for hemp and CBD product manufacturers today. So it's ultimately upon the manufacturer to implement their own quality control system. And with the boom in the space that has happened over the last several years, and certainly that which will continue to come, there can be quality issues, and there have been, I would say, some lax quality systems in place. And so what's exciting to me is to be able, with the Farm Bill, is to be able to really expand and get to scale where we know that quality intermediate and final products can be delivered to retailers and ultimately to consumers.
Jose or Christian, anything you're seeing that you're on the horizon?
Oh, I'm ridiculously excited about CBD. I'm a personal CBD user. Be happy to tell you the story individually. But what excites me most is with the passing of the Farm Bill and the interest in CPG companies, I am waiting with bated breath on the availability of CBD in a broad spectrum of products. Currently, you've got, for the most part, 5 different product formats, a few innovative plays on one of the big 5. But you know, to get to the day where CBD is widely accepted across multiple product formats as an ingredient in things, you know, Wheaties now with CBD, for example, you know, that excitement is what keeps me in this industry, and that forward-looking momentum that it will garner and generate is truly exciting for me.
Yeah, and as a flavor house, we are very excited with working with companies that really pay attention to quality, that come to us with a product and they say, oh, we tested the crop in the field and we saw that they are not applying anything, that we cannot, and then we made the oil, and the oil is pure, and they give it to us a bunch of certificates. You know, make you feel that you are working with serious people, and that's what we want from the market. Let's not make the market make any mistakes so that people start saying bad things about CBD. So I think that people should wait a little bit, you know, see what they are working, asking for certificates of analysis, go to the internet, see the companies, and buy the best product, because there are people out there, like these guys here, that are doing an excellent job. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, I think transparency is critical in the supply chain. I mean, given the issue, I mean, Christian mentioned a lot of the issues that can happen when hemp is in the ground during the growing process. There are tremendous opportunities for obtaining just through the growing process, you know, residual pesticides and heavy metals, and so really working together that all parts in the supply chain, whether it's a fully integrated business or whether there are aspects where you've got separations and different companies throughout, I think really making each each group, your grower, your processor, your formulator, and your retailer, ultimately need to become stakeholders up and down the value chain in this, because education and transparency are going to be critical to moving this industry forward, and ultimately address, because as I mentioned today, there are no particular quality or regulations in place addressing it, but as the industry grows, and as Christian mentioned, 20+ billion by 2023, there will certainly be regulations coming into the space sooner rather than later.
And it's important to note that from our perspective, we welcome responsible regulations. You know, there does need to be some oversight, but it needs to be intelligent and it needs to be responsible. And I think that would go a long way to addressing that significant barrier that we talked about earlier, which is trust in the industry from the consumer. Right now, it's just not there, and it has to be built, and it's difficult to build that. And you can liken the CBD industry to where vaping was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And there needs to be a maturation process, and that is very welcome from at least my personal perspective. I won't speak on behalf of my company or my colleagues here, but that will be an important step.
I think the other thing too, you know, from the current perspective, is on the consumer side. You know, we're seeing consumer stories, right? It's moving from fringe into mainstream, and consumers really want to talk about how CBD has changed their lives. And so, you know, social media provides us, you know, instantaneous feedback on what consumers want. They're not afraid to ask us for what they want, and you know, to push us to perform faster and better too. So we get a lot of consumer input now, so that we can deliver products that consumers are looking for, and that sort of iterative process is exciting from a brand perspective too. So what should we leave everyone with? What are the key takeaways as CBD becomes more mainstream and the supply is gonna be taking some pressure from all the demand? You know, we're processing in GMP labs, clean rooms. What do we need our customers and our consumers to really understand about how we're trying to meet their needs? Can you each address that for us? What do we want our people to take home?
So I have a couple points, and I'll do one and see if anybody picks it up, and then I'll come back if they don't. But you know, what do we want consumers to take away? As a general industry takeaway, I think it's very important for consumers to understand the companies that they're buying from and what goes into those consumer products that they are ingesting or rubbing on their skin. Because there are a multitude of different layers of companies in this industry. As within any nascent industry, you'll have some really strong players and you'll have some really bad actors. And I think that consumers need to be able to ask questions of the manufacturers and get honest and transparent answers. And I think if all CBD manufacturers can do that, then consumers build that trust, and this industry becomes a legitimate industry and takes off properly, and it sets the stage for a long-term successful industry.
But you know, for us it's very easy to attest quality because we receive the CBG, the hemp oil, which comes with analysis, so it's very easy to see. But for a consumer, I think it's so difficult just to go to the internet or to a store, and there are so many different brands in the market. How can a consumer know? Just asking questions or seeing reviews about the company? How do you think it's the best way for doing it from a consumer perspective?
Touch on Sandra?
Yeah. From a consumer perspective, I mean, I think as we've talked about transparency, it's really critical that the manufacturer, it shows the transparency, provides analysis, quality documents. I mean, it's standard in, you know, nutraceutical space that there's a quality department, there's a review, there's a standardized process that goes through, and ultimately quality, the head of quality releases the product, and that's when it's available for sale. And so it's implementing those. And so there are people today who are who are providing like a certificate of analysis of the final product, which is a very good step in the process. From the current and criticality side, we go deeper than that. It's core to us. We have a full track and trace system that's called Sentry that allows us to track hemp all the way from pre-plant through growing, where we have field reps and we have agronomists in the field with growers, through the steps of processing, ultimately to formulation and sale, and through unique codes that are put on bottles. It allows a consumer to be able to see and understand exactly how the entire process happened. We appreciate that that's more than anyone else has at this point in time, but at least the company should have the ability to show analysis, to be able to prove, because unfortunately there have been a number of incidents in the space where there has been product that's been adulterated. Some, hopefully it was all done unintentionally, but where there's mislabeled products or adulterated products are out there. And to the extent that they're in the space and sold regularly into commerce, it's not positive for any company or the entire industry as a whole, either directly with customers and certainly with related to potential future regulation.
Okay, good. Anyone else? You all said? Okay. So you can find all of us at booth 4089 on the floor. We're thrilled to have had the opportunity to talk a little bit about CBD, and if you have any questions, we're happy to take them now.
Do they have a microphone out there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Can somebody address the health claims that companies can make for their products? Kind of define that for us. And I have the second question on liability and what retailers might be having to face in terms of liability for whatever.
So I'll answer the first part of that question. So health claims. So CBD right now, and the products that are mostly sold here are not regulated under the Controlled Substances Act or otherwise. So the FDA, there should be no overt structure or function claims associated with CBD or hemp oil extract. The products have not gone fully through clinical trials, and so without that set of clinical trials and ultimate approval by the FDA, no claims should be made. And the FDA has in the past issued several warning letters to companies in this space for making claims on their product. And it's important to note in this space that claim set and the way the FDA reviews claims, it's not just simply on your label, it's on your website, it's on your social media. It all becomes, everything that's essentially part of your brand is part of your claim set.
Liabilities for sellers?
I hesitate to speculate on how to answer that, because that could run the gamut from you get a slap on the wrist to you go to prison, all of your proceeds seized. It can run the gamut. There have been cases pre-Farm Bill where it's been a slap on the wrist and cases where people do jail time. So take your labeling and claims and any overt statements that you want to make sure you do the research, make sure you consult with the appropriate legal advisors. There are attorneys who specialize in FDA. I would suggest on anything relating to health claims, seek out counsel that specializes in FDA, not your neighborhood lawyer down the street on Main Street, small town USA.
I think it's also, from a retail perspective, it's also important to engage law enforcement. As Christian said, there could be a variety of actions we've seen from, the smallest to temporary shutdowns. There are groups, industry advocacy groups that are out there trying to make sure that those are as minimal as possible and providing support to people if there become issues. But from a retail side, like I said, I think it's important if you go out and you're straightforward with local law enforcement, in the situations where we've seen that and retailers that we work with, and even just from our own perspective when we've put up our own facilities, we're very upfront and develop that relationship to make sure that everyone's comfortable from the outset, and then you don't get into an issue of, what's going to happen to me if law enforcement comes knocking.
Any other questions?
Hi, Jordan with Awesome Vapor. I had a question, clear up some misinformation or confusion I have with the different spectrums of CBD. I understand isolate is going to be CBD in its most isolated form, if you will, like just CBD by itself, the lowest THC threshold. I understand full spectrum would be more so the full plant, if we can think in that sense. I have heard misinformation, that could be misinformation, I'm not sure, that you can maybe clear up, of broad spectrum, that I've heard that broad spectrum will include this, exclude the CBNs and CBEs, or any other metabolites directly affiliated with THC. Is that truthful, or is that just false information?
I couldn't understand the question.
If I may,
I'm sorry.
Is the question, what's the difference between
Broad, full, and isolate? Or if there is a
spectrum,
difference
full
between
spectrum,
broad and full?
Isolate. What's the difference?
So the main difference between isolate is the pure CBD.
Right.
So it's 99.5, 99.9% CBD. Full spectrum oil is pretty much everything that's extractable from the plant. So it's all the cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids and sun oils. So you will have presence of CBD, CBC, CBG in its forms, and as well as THC below 0.3%.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hi.
Ashley Hansen, Director of Marketing and Development with Twisty Liquids, and a personal big advocate and lover of CBD. So with so many new initiatives in plant-based medicine, I'd like to think that we're evolving with the conscious consumer. What are your predictions for consumer-driven product development trends in the CBD space? So like right now, we got topicals and tinctures, and everyone's doing these bath bombs. I mean, we need to evolve past this, spraying the gummies with, we've got the synthetics popping up. What do you see moving forward for the companies that really want to evolve in this industry, in this space, product-wise?
So there is different trends, right? So it's in the same categories because we are calling, or we group it like ingestibles. So from our perspective, from Criticality perspective, when we're looking at ingestibles, we're looking at different delivery mechanisms, which we're doing in vitro testing so that we can have target applications. So it still will be a two-piece capsule, a soft gels, or any form, but has a specific onset or local or systemic application. So like, for example, when you're talking topicals, everybody can do topicals and there is different forms. But you can look at different ways to have skin penetration so that the local pain will be relieved much faster than normal SABs or something like that that will take longer. So we are looking more from the science perspective, what will be the different delivery mechanisms targeting different kind of applications. So the other thing that from the consumer point of view will be something that will be easy to carry and easy to take, and it can be for basically preventive maintenance, but it's something that you can carry with yourself. It can be a stick pack that you can dissolve or you can put it in water. So there is different kind of dosages and delivery mechanisms, but it still will be under the same thing. Still will be topicals or ingestibles. So it will be probably some companies, and maybe mainly in countries that is fully legalized, they will be look more in the mainstream, like protein bars or different kind of day-to-day products that you can add on into it. And that will be how intuitive or how differentiated you want to be so that they can have mass market channeling.
And so I would also answer that question a little bit differently. I agree with kind of the general format, topicals, ingestibles. I think when you think about the innovation for the consumers in the future, I think that has to be consumer driven. I think you've got to do your own proprietary research to understand, A, which consumers you're going to target, because you cannot service 100% of the consumer base, period. You'll set yourself up to fail. So I think you need to go through all sorts of consumer paneling, segmentation study, wants, need, use occasions, things like that, so that you understand why a consumer takes it, what is that occasion, and what is an appropriate delivery mechanism to suit that occasion. We can say, yes, there's going to be this product, that product, and consumers will have more choices. But if they're choices that the consumers don't want, at the end of the day, you wasted your money.
I thought you were going to talk about CBD on weenies, which you actually mentioned, and I wonder if there's any truth to that.
No, that's just, I mean, you know, the former jock in me
Right.
loved my
You want
Wheaties growing up.
CBD on your breakfast
And now,
cereal.
all the aches and pains from being a jock as a kid, I want my Wheaties with CBD.
Right. Good. Anyone else?
Hi. Post-Farm Bill, what are the current challenges that your company faces when selling or marketing CBD online?
Can you get a little closer to the...
Yeah,
Thank you.
Post-Farm Bill, what are the current challenges your company faces when selling or marketing CBD online?
Online.
And how are you overcoming that?
So post-Farm Bill, online e-commerce was somewhat difficult prior to the Farm Bill. There were a number of, for instance, banks who were not providing e-commerce solutions. However, post-Farm Bill, there are a number of banks, including nationally and essentially federally chartered banks that have moved into this space. So the Farm Bill has certainly helped from an e-commerce side. The other thing is the piece that I mentioned earlier is post-Farm Bill, essentially each state now has the ability to introduce its own set of regulations. And as of...
Attention TPE show attendees, Dan Bazarian is in the house. Stop by and meet Dan Bazarian at Low Vaping, booth 8130.
And that's another challenge.
Yeah. But so far, two states have submitted their draft regulations to the USDA, and that's Kentucky and Pennsylvania. So there will be challenges, you know, moving forward with the ability of states to have differing rules and regulations. So there will be, you know, continuing navigation of that required. But for online e-commerce, I think everybody's certainly in a better space now than they were before the 2018 Farm Bill.
So one comment, your stock is up 33% today, so congratulations.
Oh, awesome.
Pretty good, right? But a question about commodities and commoditization. If everyone starts to use these standard operating procedures, standard farming procedures, standard harvesting procedures, all the inputs become common, this becomes a commodity product. And then what becomes the differentiator? I keep hearing about best CBD. What does that really mean? And so are we really talking about a corn or a grain or any other sort of commodity that is going to be differentiated with a brand? What's the future look like?
So I can handle the commoditization. With the interest in CBD and the current price point to the farmers, there will be a tremendous interest from a lot of farmers. As more farmers come on to grow, you'll obviously have more supply, and then laws of supply and demand will dictate what the price will be. And I would expect to see, in the not too distant future, some degree of commoditization. I wouldn't expect it to go the corn, soybeans route, but I think the amount of hemp being grown, and once people get better at it, will allow for additional supply into the market. I think then what differentiates companies in the CBD space at that point is less about the agricultural inputs, but more about the trust and transparency with the consumers and building brands that consumers have reasons to believe in. You know, similar to corn, take that to corn syrup, take that to Coke and Pepsi. So the commoditization of corn hasn't really affected Coca-Cola all that much, one can argue. I won't make that an absolute definitive statement, but hypothetically. So when you think about the potential commoditization for industrial hemp, the same principles hold true. You'll have the agricultural crop, you'll have the CBD, and you'll have a suite of products that consumers want to believe in and will consume. From the technical perspective about, you know, is CBD any different? I'll defer to the experts.
Well, I think the important thing is, as you had mentioned, it's really the quality of the processes and making sure that the quality is held throughout, whether you're going from a full spectrum oil product or whether you're going to an isolate-based product. Really the differentiation there is continuing to make sure that you have the quality systems in place. There will be regulations, there will be...
Stop by booth number 8130, Go Vaping, to meet Dan Bazarian. Dan Bazarian is in the house. Meet him at Go Vaping, booth 8130.
I don't know if y'all heard, but Dan's in the house.
Dan's
so.
in the house.
Sorry, Brian, you were saying?
No, I mean, and then what's going to differentiate people is really their quality systems. I mean, even the pharmaceutical world today, there are, you know, the FDA issues cease and desist and other sort of nasty grants because even, you know, certain pharmaceutical companies don't follow all of the guidelines. And that same thing will happen ultimately here when it's, you know, our belief is it'll ultimately be regulated as a dietary supplement, you know, probably going under, you know, 21 CFR part, you know, 117. But so it's going to be the quality systems that ultimately differentiate people because you've got to be able to trust your supplier.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great show.
Thank you, everyone.